Welcome to Tentpole Trauma, the podcast where we look at movies that came with hype and high hopes, but left with crushing disappointment, either critically, at the box office, or both. Freed from the weight of expectations, we seek to examine these underperformers under a new light, parsing through the good, the bad, and everything in between with the hopes of gaining a better understanding as to why they failed to find their audience. Warning, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie that we're discussing today, I suggest you stop the podcast and go watch it. Then when you come back and listen, you'll get more out of the discussion. On this episode, we discuss Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Okay, I am Sebastian, and I am here with Jennifer.
Hello.
And welcoming back to the podcast, Troy.
Hey, you guys.
Woo.
All right, that was a real lively greeting, Troy.
I'm trying to improve because my usual greetings are...
Yeah, but maybe people love that about your greetings. We'll see. We'll see what the feedback dictates.
That it sounds like I'm being choked.
It is the Halloween season. We are in October, and that means we're going to be covering some horror movies this month. And you can't cover big horror disappointments without talking about possibly the greatest of all horror franchise disappointments. A film that has been redeemed in the past, 10 years or more, I would say. But we are talking about Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. This movie was not a box office failure, so in a way it's a little unfair that we are labeling it a tentpole trauma. However, when this movie came out, it was resoundingly rejected by critics and fans of the Halloween franchise for a very clear reason, I think, and we will talk about that as we get towards the end. But for a long time, this movie was sort of the butt of the joke when it came to horror franchises. Like, oh, Halloween 3, they just jumped the shark with that one. But after decades of endless Michael Myers sequels, people have sort of come back to this one and started to sort of reappreciate it. I'd say that started even in the beginning of the 2000s. People started to come around to Halloween 3. Troy, you are a fan of Halloween 3, are you not?
I'm a serious fan of Halloween 3. I love Halloween 3. And I'll say that I am not one of the recent converts. I've been a fan of Halloween 3 for a really long time. It was no fun to be a fan of Halloween 3.
Yeah, and I can back you up on that because I remember when I first met you, one of the first things I learned about you was that you were a Halloween 3 super fan. But what about you, Jennifer? How do you feel about Halloween 3, or how have you felt about Halloween 3?
I've always liked Halloween 3. Halloween 3 was introduced to me through one of my best friends who's like was like a sister growing up together. She's like 3 years older than me. So a lot of scary movies were alongside with her in my younger years. And I had seen Halloween at the tender age of 7 and had many, many nightmares, but also really, I think paved the way for me getting into horror. I don't remember when I saw Halloween 2, but Halloween 3 I remember because she had seen it before me. And it was like, she was telling me all about, oh my God, and this happens with the masks and da 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 da. And so I was really scared and hyped for it. And, it's not that scary at all.
That's a matter of opinion.
But I mean, I remember at the time thinking like, the concept of it here more, it was actually scarier, I think, hearing about it than once I actually saw it. But yeah, I have love for Halloween 3.
I am a fan of Halloween 3 as well, although it's been sort of a longer road to come around to it than either of you two. I saw Halloween and Halloween 2 on television, and I really loved them as a kid. And so when Halloween 3 came out, I was like, oh, they made another Halloween, and I was excited to see it. I didn't end up seeing it in the theater because I was too young to go to see an R-rated movie, and this was one my parents were not going to take me to go see. And I ended up seeing it on cable because it would show on HBO or something a lot. So I watched it a lot on cable, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, there was no Michael Myers anywhere. I remember thinking the guys in the suits, I was like squinting and trying to make them Michael Myers in my mind. Like, are they Michael Myers? And I kept looking everywhere for Michael Myers as I would watch it, because I would sort of catch it in chunks, and I'd be like, all right, maybe Michael Myers is going to show up now. And he never did. However, the scene that we will talk about when we get there, that is the sort of defining scene of this movie, did kind of freak me out, because to me the whole movie seemed kind of boring, and then this one scene happens and I'm like, whoa, this is kind of twisting my mind here. So I had this sort of relationship with Halloween 3 where I was one of the people that was disappointed that there was no Michael Myers in it, but at the same time I was like, yeah, but there's something kind of weird and unsettling about that movie, and especially that scene. Now, this is directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, his first film, and he was sort of in the John Carpenter camp. I believe he worked on Halloween and Halloween 2. This was his big chance to step up as a director, because John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, who are producers on the project, wanted nothing to do with directing it or writing it. It was Carpenter's idea that the Halloween franchise become a anthology where each new movie would then be a different story centering around the holiday of Halloween, but it would not feature Michael Myers. That all got thrown out of the window after this movie because of its disappointing reception, but that was the idea to begin with. So they went and got a script from the British sci-fi writer Nigel Neal, who wrote a lot of the Quatermass stories and movies. And you can kind of see that in this movie. There's definitely some kooky sci-fi ideas, but apparently he was so pissed that they wanted to add like violence and gore to it that he took his name off of it. So he is not credited at all on this script. Troy, are you familiar at all with the works of Nigel Neal?
Yeah, I know the Quatermass movies, definitely. And then I honestly mostly familiar with Nigel Neal through John Carpenter, because he would always be referencing Nigel Neal in some of his interviews and stuff. And then in Prince of Darkness, he took on the moniker of Quatermass, in his it said directed by Alan Quatermass or something. So John Carpenter actually kind of always pointed people in that direction. So I'm familiar with Nigel Neal.
Jen, I know you're probably not familiar with Nigel Neal.
Nope. You didn't know that I was a closeted Nigel Neal fan?
I did not.
I've been keeping this from you all this time. It's just for me. Me and Nigel.
Just me and Nigel.
And this is making plans for Nigel.
But because of that Nigel Neal influence, this movie definitely brings a sci-fi element into the Halloween franchise. And that is no more evident than in these stunning opening credits. We see a jack-o'-lantern being slowly made on a computer display, like a computer display from 1982, the year this movie came out. And we're getting this pretty awesome John Carpenter, Alan Howarth music, this sort of pulsating electronic score as we're watching these lines of resolution fill in a terrifying jack-o'-lantern Troy, how do you feel about this just chilling intro?
Well, I just wanted to correct Jen when she was saying this wasn't necessarily scary, because what you just described is absolutely terrifying. Let me be honest here. I love this intro, but it's more about the score. I kind of don't really care what's happening on screen. I think when I first saw it, I liked that it was doing, what the first two films did, where they kind of zoom in on a jack-o'-lantern. This was trying to do a different version of that. And It's laughable now, but at the time, that's what graphics looked like. But the score, I'm probably not alone on this, but for me, it's my favorite John Carpenter score.
Wow.
Is the score to Halloween 3. I love it. I listen to it constantly. I like that it's almost entirely electric. He doesn't try to have like voices in it or, synthesized choir or piano or anything. And it's just purely a synth score. So as far as a like an electronic score, I think it's amazing. So I love the opening credits to this.
I agree with Troy. I really do love the score. I think it's awesome. And I do appreciate that they were trying to tie in what they'd done at the beginning of the other movies. However, as we were watching this for the millionth time, and we've seen this so many times, but watching it really intensely last night, when this started, and I was like, man, this is not the sequel to Halloween 2 people were looking for, like just right out the gate. Like, because I think we had watched Halloween 2 the night before.
So you're doing it in order this year, in chronological order.
Well, we're going to have to jump around a little because of our next podcast, but yeah, basically we are.
Yeah, so it was just viewing it and watching it, really intensely now. I just was like, I could feel the disappointment of Michael Myers fans when this had come out. Like they were just like, what? I could just see a collective, huh?
Yeah, I like to imagine people sitting down in the theater in 1982 seeing this bullshit sort of unfold before them and them being like, oh man, they must have known right away they were in trouble.
So for me, the disappointment wasn't necessarily the opening credits, because like I said, I really love the score, but it was the following shot, basically, right after the credits appear, where you get a little title on the bottom of the screen that says Northern California, and it's like a freeway overpass.
Yeah.
It just looks like Burbank at night. That's when the production value, I realized, was going to be very low.
This whole opening scene looks like it takes place in the parking lot of like a warehouse that's like a porn distributor in like North Hollywood somewhere.
Yep.
It kind of was.
You're not even getting the high production values of like Pasadena in the first movie or whatever. You're like, we're off in some alleyway
Sun
or
Valley.
something. Yeah, in
Yes.
Sun Valley or
Yes.
something. But we're following a character we will learn is Grimbridge, who is fleeing some sort of tormentor. And it's great because he's got this bright orange jack-o'-lantern mask like stuffed in his like pants or whatever. So you can see that he's his belt as he's running around. And he ends up at like this garage or whatever, and he gets attacked by this dude in a just plain gray like dress suit. And we'll see this repeated throughout the movie, these killers who wear just gray dress suits and they have like black gloves like Giallo characters sort of. And they attack the guy and he grabs hold of this chain that's like attached to like a cement wheel stop that's holding a car in place, and he pulls that out and it crushes his killer between the two cars. I will say that at least once we're sort of into the movie, and this is mostly, I think, thanks to Dean Cundy, the cinematographer, it does feel like a Carpenter movie.
That right there is one of the reasons why I kind of love this movie, is because it feels more like a John Carpenter movie than most John Carpenter movies.
Yes.
Especially his later ones, because the production team behind this is basically that original Carpenter family working and all together on this thing. So it looks, feels, sounds like Carpenter at his peak.
I 100% agree, Troy. And I had the same thoughts when we were watching this, as I was like, this really, I know it's Tommy Lee Wallace, but it feels like John Carpenter, even though he didn't want to have anything to really do with this.
But him and Deborah Hill produced it.
Yeah.
And also, you said that he didn't have a hand in writing it, but apparently he did.
Okay.
Once it came back from Nigel Neal, Carpenter did take a pass at it, and then it got handed to Tom Lee Wallace, and then he did another rewrite of it. I'm guessing that Carpenter kind of distanced himself from that writing credit after the box office came through.
Well, he probably couldn't take the credit for whatever reason, like guild reasons or whatever.
Well, maybe it was that double dipping thing because he had The Thing that same year.
That's right. It probably had more to do with that. I'm sure he wouldn't have cared if his name was on it as a writing credit.
And what year is that?
82.
1982. That's right, Sebastian.
Oh, no. Are we going back to the 1982 discussion?
How many movies have we done in 1982 now? Like 4.
It was a big year.
Tron, Blade Runner. When are we going to do One from the Heart?
Oh, yeah. That belongs in this Tentpole Trauma discussion for sure.
The other thing I was going to say was when the guys with this, when we see the first guy with the suit show up, and throughout the film, I love the score every time those guys show up. It's like, it's just like this thing, and it's
just those
like
little stings.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. It's perfect. It's so great.
One of the things that made me kind of gravitate to this movie before I knew much, I can't remember when I first saw it, but I think I had been briefed on that Michael Myers wasn't in it. But I do remember totally being intrigued by Halloween 3 because of the poster and the video box.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was different from the first two. And it was like, now we're in like fucking chrome. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. And it's got this demon witch on the front of it with little kids going trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
And it just looks evil. So yeah, anyways, it's one of my favorite one sheets as well.
It's a good one sheet.
I love the poster to this movie.
Yeah, and unfortunately that demon witch isn't really in the movie.
Yeah, it's a bit of a bait and switch.
Unless you count the mask, which I don't think is fair to count. But, they got to sell it on something, and they don't have Michael Myers, so they need some sort of scary visage to put in there. It's a good poster. So Grimbridge escapes to a gas station, and we get a title card letting us know that this is taking place 1 hour later. And I need to bring up the passage of time in this movie is so friggin' weird.
Yep.
This movie could take place over the course of 2 days, but for whatever reason, it's stretched out over the course of a week. So you keep getting these title cards that tell
There's
you
a lot
like,
of title cards.
This is the next day, in weird transitions where they have to make it go to the next day. So like you'll just see like people hanging out and then like the sun comes up and it's the next day. Like it's so weird the way they've decided to have time change. Like just have it take place over like 2 days before Halloween or whatever. But no.
Also, the other thing, just this is kind of my personal take on it with the passage of time and the title cards and the days that are passing by in this, is that later on in the movie, Tom Adkins mentions that he only has one pair of clothes. So I just keep thinking like, ew, like this man reeks probably of beer and sex, and it's like 2 days later.
He actually says, like, I think these should last one more day.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. It's the fact that in addition with these title cards that are telling you like how long things are taking or how many days they're out there makes me fixate on his dirty clothes.
We should get into the Silver Shamrock theme because it's such a major part of this movie. We go to the gas station, and the gas station attendant, who's sort of a minor character who comes in and out in this part and then at the end, is watching TV, and he's watching a program about Stonehenge, which is going to play a major part in the story as well. They're talking about some theft of a Stonehenge rock or whatever. And then this advertisement comes on the TV. And if for some reason you haven't seen Halloween 3, and come on, let's face it, probably no one listening to this podcast hasn't seen Halloween 3. But if for some reason you haven't, this advertising theme is the thing that will stick in your mind most prominently after seeing this. It is a shamrock that comes up to the screen, and while it's coming up to the screen, you hear this like circus music, kind of like our theme music, that goes like boop 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 boop, and then 8 more days till Halloween, 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 like sung to the tune of London Bridge is Falling Down. But then it's like silver shamrock. So we are seeing that there is this big event coming up in 8 days.
There's a big giveaway, but they never mention what the giveaway is. But somehow all of America is fascinated by the giveaway.
Right.
The giveaway that nobody knows what it is.
And the thing that Silver Shamrock is most known for outside of gags and stuff are these Halloween masks, which are 3 masks: a jack-o'-lantern head, a skull, and a witch. And I was noting this time while I was watching it, like, the witch mask is by far the best mask, because you get like this like piece of fabric on it with like all the other masks are just these like standard kind of rubber masks that you'd get in any sort of Woolworths at the time or whatever. But the witch mask, you get a little bit extra with that. So I'd be going for the witch mask.
Yeah, I'm kind of into the witch mask too.
Same.
I have considered purchasing these masks, which they do sell now, but they're like, I think they're like $250 for the set of 3 of them.
Really?
Yeah.
They can't make cheaper versions of them? They're not like anything special.
How many nerds are going to go out and shell out $250 for these masks? A lot. A lot of nerds are going to do that.
I'm sure a lot of nerds have. They're pretty cool. They were designed by Don Post, who is a famous rubber mask maker. So they went right to the source for that. And I mean, the Silver Shamrock, it's this weird thing that it's this Irish novelty company that makes Halloween masks. So right there, we're getting these 2 weird things being smushed together for whatever reason, which is all leading to Stonehenge, I guess.
It's just a great earworm, and it's like it's playing in my head all the time right now. Like the whole time during this podcast, I'm like, dun, 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 dun,
yeah, you
dun.
do hear this song constantly through this movie.
Right, and to the main character's chagrin, like he gets just as annoyed by it as the viewer does by the time you're about halfway through the movie. But let's talk about our main character. Our main character is Dr. Dan Chalice, who is played by the immortal Tom Atkins. Woo! Tom Atkins is a character actor who did most of his most famous work in the early 80s. He's sort of like a budget Tom Selleck, I'd say. Like he's kind of a more alcoholic, bloated, like mustachioed, cut from the sort of Tom Selleck mode, but not quite cutting it. He wears like a fake members only jacket most of this movie. It's sort of beige. He is pretty wonderful as this role. I think this is one of his defining roles. The first time we meet him, he's going to visit his kids who live with his divorced wife, who is played by Nancy Loomis from the original Halloween, though she was known as like Nancy Keys or something here. She'd been remarried.
But I think she was Tommy Lee Wallace's wife during this shoot, right?
She's credited as Nancy Kyes or whatever.
Okay.
She acted under the name of Nancy Loomis.
Okay.
Is what it says. So that's what it has in her biography.
For whatever reason, she was using a different name when she got credited for this movie. Tom Atkins, Dr. Dan Chalice, he's a terrible dad. He doesn't pay enough attention to his kids. He basically blows them off all the time. He's an alcoholic.
He's clearly up front an alcoholic. He's drinking constantly in this movie.
An unrepentant alcoholic, which I think is a rarity these days, where a character just drinks all the time and never changes, never sobers up, really. And on top of it, he's a doctor.
Well, yeah. And she says that when he comes over to visit the kids, she's like, "Oh, drinking and doctoring, what a great combo," or something like that.
Yeah.
She can't help herself.
She does a lot of complaining. That's kind of what Nancy Kies does in this movie, is nags.
Yes, she's a real nag, but she does it really well.
She really does. And with a lot of it, we just hear, I mean, we only really see her, I think, in the beginning. Like the rest is kind of nagging via phone, but
Right. She's like yelling at him over the phone the rest of the movie.
you hear it big time. It's very loud and clear.
It's like if you took her scene from Halloween where she's just on the phone complaining about spilled butter on her. If she's just doing that through the rest of the movie in Halloween 3.
And they've given her like a wig that's sort of gray to make her look older,
Yeah.
but she's clearly only a few years older than she was in Halloween.
Right.
Which is funny because in Halloween, she was supposed to be playing a teenager, but she looked like she was about 35.
Right.
And then jump to now she's supposed to be some 40-something. So she has a range in her acting.
Yes.
I think her range was she was dating the guy making the movie and he wanted to put her in. Dan Chalice has shown up to give his kids these crummy masks, but they've already got the good silver shamrock masks, so they don't need his masks. But this is going to play into it later because those masks do something nefarious. But he's not there long because he gets like a page or whatever and he's got to go running off to the hospital even though he was supposed to take the kids with him. So he's like, I gotta go.
By the way, did you notice that one of those kids is little Joshua Miller?
Oh, yes. Joshua Miller. Not our friend Joshua Miller, but...
No, like Near Dark.
Near Dark.
That's right.
Little baby Joshua Miller.
Near Dark and Teen Witch, Joshua Miller.
He's even creepy in this, too, even though he's supposed to be a cute kid. There's something creepy about him.
I just love that the kids, it's just like, you know, he gives them they're just in these paper bags and he hands them to each kid and they like pull out these shitty masks and they're just like not even like trying to pretend like or say thank you or anything. They're like, Mom already got us good masks.
Yeah. So Dr. Dan rushes off to the hospital and like right away we get a sense that he is a terrible doctor. He's touching one of the nurses inappropriately the whole time. Definitely would be a sexual harasser by today's standards. She's like, don't get fresh with me or whatever. And he's like, oh, Agnes, you know I love you, baby, or whatever.
She smacks him back on the butt. She gives it right back to him. She's like, you watch it, and smacks him on the butt. I mean, it was a different time.
And I don't know if it's in this part of the movie or not, but it's right around here where we see him go into his lounge room or his office, and he's got a fridge there stocked with beer.
Well, he says he needs a nap. He goes in to take a nap. But Grimbridge has been brought into the hospital by the gas station attendant. So that's why Dr. Dan Chalice has been called in this emergency, because I guess no one else could have helped this guy who's just sort of rambling about, they're coming. And like the Silver Shamrock ad is, of course, playing on the hospital TV, but no one else but Dr. Dan Chalice could come in to ignore this patient and go take a nap in the sofa.
To Dr. Dan's credit, I believe Dr. Dan does try to help him, and then he's exhausted by this, or just drunk. I don't know. That's when he was like, oh, I need to go, lay down. And they're like, oh, the doctor's lounge is open. And that's when he goes in there. But I think he had done a little work.
All right.
You just were saying how that character's going, they're coming. So this was also very inspired by Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yep.
And the 1956 one, which Tommy Lee Wallace named the town Santa Mira.
Yeah, so that vibe is very clear throughout the movie, especially in some of the later scenes when, it's supposed to be sort of paranoid and running around the town and it's all deserted. It's very obviously inspired by Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But poor Grimbridge doesn't last very long. He is murdered by one of these gray-suited killers with the black gloves. The killer comes in and jams him through the eyes with his fingers and then pulls out the bridge of his nose, which is really kind of a gross gore effect that I appreciated.
Yes.
Yeah, that disturbed me the first time I saw it.
It's really gruesome.
It's disgusting.
There's a lot of sort of head trauma in this movie. I feel like that was sort of a focus of this movie, is like, let's really fuck up people's heads. Then the killer just wanders out into his car and dumps a bunch of gasoline on himself really robotically and then lights himself on fire. Dan doesn't know what to do, but he can't go pick up the kids now because there's been this murder.
Yeah, and he hears it from his wife.
Yeah, Linda, I believe her name is. She really gives him a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, somebody died here, just like shouting at him over the phone.
And then he's like, no, I haven't been drinking. Like
Even though he is lying, he clearly has been drinking.
So then we are introduced to Grimbridge's daughter, who is named Ellie, played by Stacey Nelkin. Now, interestingly, when we did our Blade Runner podcast, Troy couldn't identify Stacey Nelkin because she had tried out for the Pris role in Blade Runner, but it went to Daryl Hannah. Troy, this is one of your favorite movies. You couldn't remember Stacey Nelkin?
I know. I hadn't been following the career of Stacey Nelkin. Her name isn't. It doesn't come up to register immediately when I think of Halloween 3, but now I know.
Apparently, Stacey Nelkin was at one point like a crush of Woody Allen. Like he was chasing her around New York at some point.
I could see that.
Did this woman have a big career?
No, but she showed up in stuff. She had a minor career.
She's known for Halloween 3.
She's known for Halloween 3 and the white-hot romance that's about to take place between her and Tom Atkins, a.k.a. Dr. Dan. But, like, so Dr. Dan sees her. She comes in to identify her dad's body, and Dr. Dan sort of sees her, kind of, like, stares at her down the hallway. Like, so we clearly get the idea right away that he's kind of creeping on her from afar, but she's, like, in mourning. So then we have one of these weird time changes again, where we're like 3 days later and like Dr. Dan is in his local dive bar drinking, and the dive bar has like an Irish bartender who's like, you know, Aaron Gobrach or whatever as he serves Dr. Dan his drinks. There's a lot of really cartoonish Irish accents in this movie.
In this bar, there's a Irish?
Yes.
The guy has an Irish accent? I missed that.
How have you missed this, Troy? You watch this movie like every other week.
Because once we get into this movie later on, like the accents are so fucking in your face, which I was going to ask you about, Sebastian O'Brien. Do you identify with it? Can you relate to this movie?
Oh, yes, I do, laddie. I identify with these accents.
Or are you offended by this movie?
Don't make me hit you over the head with me shillelagh. They're like serious, like Lucky Charms accents. Like I'm pretty much convinced that nobody in this movie is Irish at all.
Dan O'Harely is Irish, but his accent is like so subdued next to everybody else. No, I actually was wondering about it because one of the characters we come to later who runs Rafferty's hotel, and he's like born in New York.
He's totally doing the Lucky Charms leprechaun. Yeah. But so, yeah, Dan is drinking in this bar, and the bar is playing advertisements for the Horror-thon, which is going to feature the movie Halloween. So they are establishing that Halloween, the movie, is not taking place in this same universe. In this universe, it's a movie, just like our universe. And then the Silver Shamrock ad comes on, and Dan's like, "Can you change the channel, please?" Like, he really doesn't like that ad as he's like drinking his whiskey shots and beer. And then Ellie comes in and sort of sidles up to him. She's been looking for him or whatever to basically cajole him into starting off on this investigation with him.
Yeah, so she was asking about him at the hospital, and they said, "Oh, he's drinking at the bar." She's like, "Great, he's my man. I need to go have that guy help me out here. I'll go find him at the bar."
There's nothing sexier than a man who spends most of his days drinking in a bar.
Day drinking on his lunch break.
A doctor for sure is going to have a malpractice suit on his hands at some point.
I like that bar. That looks like a good dive bar and a good day drinking bar for sure.
Yes.
So she cajoles him into sort of joining her investigation. They go to her dad's hardware store, and he has those masks in his hardware store. And they look in his ledger to see that he's actually gone to Santa Mira to pick up masks. That's what he was doing right before he was found. And Dan remembers, he had one of those masks in his hands. So Dan just picks up a sixer of High Life, as you do. He calls his nag of an ex-wife to tell her that he can't take the kids yet again this weekend because it was his turn. But he's got something he's got to do.
I love this scene.
I so appreciate throughout the film that he's just the worst dad and like unapologetic about it.
No, during that scene where he's got a 6-pack of Milwaukee Lights on top of this payphone.
It's High Life, Miller High Life.
Miller High Life. And there doesn't seem to be any comedy or irony in this scene. Like it seems
No.
to be played straight. Like here we go with our hero.
And he's just like lying to her, and he's like, "Yeah, I've got to go to this conference. I don't remember the hotel where we're staying. Yeah, I'll call you when I get there." I mean, like it's just like it's like I can only imagine.
I think the attempt was to be a tough guy.
I don't know. I just was thinking about how wonderful it would have been to be married to him, and how if this is what she's getting now, like how good it must have been when they were actually together.
Let's face it, you are married to him. All I need is the mustache, and we're there.
And you have the addition of being able to turn on the Lucky Charms accent when
That's right.
Jen wants it.
Oh, and believe me, she does. One thing we should mention before this all happens, Dr. Dan is bugging his friend, who's also the coroner, Teddy, who is a woman, a pretty attractive woman in her like mid to late 30s, I would say. But he and her clearly have had some kind of fling or something, because he's like, remember that time that you like, and she's like, oh, or whatever, like this weird sort of innuendo they pass between them. But he's trying to get her to look at the body that was immolated in the car for clues or whatever. And we're going to keep cutting back to her like several times throughout the movie. He like stops what he's doing and like calls Teddy to get more info on the body that she's exhuming. And she's like, I don't know there's just car parts in here.
Also, it seems like all she's doing is working on sifting through these trays from the car parts. Like he'll call her randomly at whatever time of day, and there she is, like sitting there continuing to sift through these trays of car parts.
Like there's like 4 scenes of this throughout the movie.
Yeah.
It's like the thing they use just to cut back to. And unfortunately, Teddy's going to meet an unpleasant end. She gets killed by one of the gray-suited guys, like near the end of the movie, but he kills her with this drill. While this scene is going on, there's this smooth jazz song playing in the background that always like sticks in my head, because there's like this castanets like click click going on. It like goes on for like 5 minutes as she's being murdered. It's kind of an amazing little bit of soundtrack.
Kind of sounds like a bit of a Herb Alpert song.
There's lots of good background music, jazz, that's like diegetic music that's being played on the radio. Like later when Dr. Dan and Ellie are making sweet love, there's some awesome like sexy smooth jazz going on the radio. I really appreciate whoever wrote that music. I don't know if it's Alan Howarth or Carpenter or whoever. I appreciate the diegetic background music in this movie.
It's similar to What's Going On in the Fog, because of Adrian Barbeau as the DJ. So we're kind of get the same vibe.
Yeah, you need to hear these. We interrupt this program constantly.
Yeah.
That would have been so great if it was her from the Fog as the DJ.
That's a missed opportunity.
Really tie it all in.
Because they're sort of in the same area. They're in Northern California.
Yep. That would have been cool.
All right, so we get to Santa Mira, as Troy pointed out, the same town, I guess, that's an invasion of the Body Snatchers. And this town is completely run by the Silver Shamrock Corporation.
Which is run by just Irish people. Thick accent Irish people.
So this whole town is full of Irish people. Everyone's Irish in this town. Everyone is under the rule of the Silver Shamrock Corporation, to the point where they have a curfew. You hear over like this loudspeakers like, everyone get inside, it's curfew.
Which is who's on the speaker?
Jamie Lee Curtis, I believe, isn't it?
Yes.
And she's the one, when he tries to call out of the town and can't get a line, she's the operator that he's speaking to.
Well, I'd also like to point out, though, there is one person in town that's not Irish, and that's the hobo that Tom Atkins runs into, because he's got some things to say about how things are being run in Santa Mira, and how that Cochran wouldn't give him a job and he wouldn't hire him. And Tom Atkins kindly shares his booze with him because he doesn't have any diseases, as he tells him.
The way this character talks and the way he is dressed is, you cannot describe him as anything else but a hobo. He's got like the Hollywood grease paint smudge on his cheek and the fedora hat that's like tipped to one side and the 5 o'clock shadow.
Sadly, no bindle, though. He's not carrying a bindle. That would have been great.
It could have been in his shack, but he was definitely riding the rails.
Yes,
this guy
definitely.
is like riding the rails.
Yes, he looks like the freight hopper in Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Yes.
He has a line that I really like. He comes out of nowhere, out of the darkness, as Dan's walking back to the hotel room that he's rented with Ellie, and they've already started to get hot and heavy. But he's walking back with a bottle of booze because I guess he just paused their makeout session because he needed more booze in order to have sex, I guess. And this hobo comes out of the darkness and is like, "No, sorry. I just saw you with that bottle and it looked a little heavy." If it wasn't for COVID, I'd be asking for pulls off of people's bottles by telling them it looked a little heavy.
I don't got a disease or anything. Mind if I take a swig off that?
But everybody in this town loves Connell Cochran, who is running the show, except for this hobo. Yeah, and he's mad, as Jennifer pointed out, because he didn't give this guy a job. And he's like, "Fuck you, Cochran," or whatever. And Dr. Dan's like, "Oh, be quiet." And he's like, "I don't care." And so then the hobo goes wandering back to his shack that's in like a scrapyard. Then he is murdered by the men in the gray suits, because what could be more threatening to your novelties empire than a drunk?
This is an important character because without him, I don't know if we would understand that since Silver Shamrock has moved in, the town is completely changed overnight because of Connell Cochran.
Such a name, man.
Connell Cochran. I will not be able to get that straight through this entire podcast.
I'm not even gonna try.
Yeah, this poor hobo, all he's got to eat is cheese whiz on bread. He's making himself a cheese whiz on bread sandwich before he's murdered so brutally by the minions of Connell Cochran. But like back at the hotel, we're sort of getting these ancillary characters who are basically just here to die. One is a family arriving in an RV, and that is Buddy Kupfer and his family. And he's got Lil Buddy as his son, who's this awful redheaded kid running around screaming, and his wife, who's sort of a goof. And then there's this other woman who has her own novelty store in San Francisco, Marge Gutman. And she's pissed about the quality controls on the masks.
Because she was like, I can't trust, they can't get it right, and don't try to get them to mail order anything. She's like, I just have to come up down here and get it myself. And she was very upset with how things are being run at the Silver Shamrock factory.
That's right.
I do appreciate how colorful these characters are.
Oh, yeah. They're so over the top. They're super fun.
Like, these could just be customers showing up, and I feel like Tommy Lee Wallace went the extra step to sort of turn up the volume to 11 and make these people just totally obnoxious. I mean, little Buddy like flips off his parents as he's riding off on
his bike away. The ancillary characters at the motel are kind of like in the same vein as the people that come to the chocolate factory in Willy Wonka.
Yes.
Like everyone's just kind of like, they're just kind of terrible in their own ways, but so enjoyable.
Enjoyable, and you're going to really enjoy seeing them get killed in the most creative ways.
Yes.
They also... Hey, Tentpole listeners, lend us your ears for a brief moment so we can tell you about our new sponsor, Anchor. Have you ever wondered how we've managed to get this scintillating podcast up on all the platforms you crave? The secret to that is Anchor. I'm going to be honest with you, we had no clue whatsoever how to get a podcast out there to the masses. It would have probably taken us weeks to figure that stuff out, draining our enthusiasm and causing us to while away the hours on technical details that didn't interest us and made us wish we were dead, or at least doing something more fun. Thankfully, we didn't have to do that because we had Anchor.
Anchor is the all-in-one platform for podcast. It can help with every aspect related to podcasting, from creating your podcast to monetizing it, distributing it to all the major platforms, and monitoring your downloads and listeners. They'll even host your podcast for free. In fact, all of this is free, and it frees up your time, allowing you to get your podcast started and out to listeners, allowing you more precious time to spend watching unboxing videos, ordering hilarious novelty shirts, or arguing online about Star Wars.
Yes, this is a shameless plug, but for something we truly use and believe in. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place.
Download the free, did we mention it's free? Anchor app through your preferred app store, or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Those seem like characters out of a vacation movie or something.
Yeah, it's very 80s.
Yes, yes.
Dan comes back to the hotel room with his booze bottle that's been lipped by a hobo. But he's treated to the sight of Ellie waiting for him in a camisole. They've literally have no bags with them, to the point where the hotel manager, the Lucky Charms hotel manager, is like, "Oh boy, you sure are traveling light, aren't ye?" Or whatever, because all she's got is this like one little...
It's like a travel kit that you would put a toothbrush in or something.
No, that's like a woman's like makeup case from like you do like your like toiletries. That's what that is.
But she managed to pack it with a black silk nightie.
Yeah, it's like a camisole. Like, so she was like ready to fuck. Like, she's like, I don't care who I run into. I'm packing this and I'm getting laid this weekend.
But she's still grieving, you guys, over Papa.
Papa.
Well, the best way to get over your grief is to have sex with a drunken doctor.
That's what they say.
I think the age difference between these two is like 38 years or something. But he asks her, he says, "How old are you anyways?" And she says, "I'm older than I look."
Right, and this is after. They've already been doing it. And then he's like, "By the way, how old are you?"
Yeah, way too late.
A lot of sense of urgency for cracking the case here.
Well, you know, getting to the bottom of a murder can make you quite horny. But while they're making sweet love, next door, poor Marge Gutman, she's trying to read her book and she's settled down, and so she starts to tweak with the mask, and she pops off, or the little button that has the Silver Shamrock logo on it has already come off, and she's like fiddling with the back of it because she sees like this computer chip in the back of it, and this like laser beam shoots out of the computer chip, and she gets zapped in the face.
I love the noise that it makes. It's got that cool sci-fi laser noise when it comes out.
Yeah. It's like,
And so she gets zapped in the face, and then we get this amazing sort of prosthetic head, like that's bursting open with bugs and snakes and everything.
No snakes yet, but yeah, I think there's a couple potato bugs, just things that look kind of creepy. But her face is obliterated, like her mouth is blown open, and you see these missing teeth. It's a pretty cool, gross out scene.
Yeah, it's pretty gnarly. And by the way, yes, they went with like the creepiest bugs. The potato bug, or I think they're also called Jerusalem crickets.
Yeah.
I think this is the other name for them. I went down a rabbit hole years ago of like looking at those bugs, and wow.
Oh, I remember those as a kid. I remember seeing those, and they were always terrifying, those bugs, because they're harmless. I think they're totally harmless, but they just look horrible.
No, I think they will bite you.
Really?
I don't know if their bite is, poisonous or whatever, but I think they can bite. But they're huge.
They just look like giant bee beetles.
Yeah, good choice is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
That was a choice, and it was a good one.
So the lab guys come to take Marge's body away. It's not just a normal ambulance here in Santa Mira. Silver Shamrock handles everything, even sudden deaths. And so these lab guys come to take Marge, and we are introduced finally to Connell Cochran. We've heard his name said many times, but we haven't seen him. He is played by the character actor Dan O'Herlihy. At this point, he's a man in his, late 60s or something. Definitely the best performance of the movie, I think.
Yeah, he's a seasoned, award-winning actor. I don't know why he did this.
He probably did this because he saw that Donald Pleasance had done Halloween and was thinking like, ooh, I want to get on that gravy train or whatever. I can probably drink my whiskey all day on set and get away with this.
I remember him from Failsafe. He's great in that movie.
He shows up later, a few years later in RoboCop. He plays the old man.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Right.
He's the villain. He's definitely the best performance of the movie. He does this great sort of ingratiating, sort of nice guy. And then later he'll turn evil. So there's a nice layered performance here where he's coming off really sort of like the sweet, kindly old man. It's great. I really enjoy his presence. Whenever I return to this movie, he's kind of my favorite part. Next to, of course, Tom Atkins's undeniable sexual heat.
I also really love, I just say Cochran because I can't say the full name like you can.
Connell Cochran.
Connell.
It sounds obscene when you say it and pronounce everything.
Connell Cochran.
No, I really enjoy his hair in this too.
Oh, he has some sick Irish hair in it.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, Tommy Lee Wallace wanted to cast all the androids as redheads.
That would have been amazing.
Exclusively. And I think John Carpenter, somebody stepped in and said, or maybe, no, he said he just couldn't find enough redheads. But that was initially what he wanted, is an army of red-headed androids.
There's one ginger in there.
Yeah, there's one.
But yeah, Cochran explains that like, oh, Marge is fine. There was just a misfire or whatever, and she's going to be taken to their novelty factory where they have the best medical equipment or whatever. And like Dr. Dan's like trying to get in there, and he's like, I'm a doctor. I can help. I'm a doctor. And Connell Cochran's like, no. We have the finest facilities up at Silver Shamrock. Don't worry a thing about Marge, even though she's like been covered with a
sheet.
She's being rolled out as a deceased person.
Yeah. But they're going to take her back to the factory. They have a great facility there. They have some, they're going to fix her right up. Don't worry.
And so the next day, Dan and Ellie go to the factory, and this is when I was talking about, there's this like transition where they're just sort of hanging out. They go back to their hotel room and they're like, well, we should go to the factory tomorrow. And like Dan just sits in the chair and like Ellie crashes out on the bed, and then they like
the next day
fade to the next day, and like the suns come up.
And this is where now I'm starting to think about Dr. Dan's clothes. He takes his clothes off to have sex and then immediately puts his clothes back on and lights up a cigarette and goes scouting for booze in the morning. In fact, we see her take a shower once, but he didn't go near that thing.
So yeah, the next day they get up and he doesn't change, and they go to the factory. And they go there to check the ledgers or whatever to see if her dad was there. And we get another older woman doing a hilariously cartoonish Irish accent. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this actress was Irish.
There's no way this woman was Irish. If she was Irish, she was kicked out of the country for speaking with that accent.
And she's like, oh, yes, right here. See, your father was here. We gave him his order and just sent him on his way. And they're like, all right, then. But then the Kupfers come in, and we find out that Buddy is the best salesperson of Silver Shamrock items, which is going to be a little, weird as to how he's treated later.
I had the same thought. Okay, no good deed.
Now, let me ask you this. We're going to soon find out that these men in the gray suits, spoilers, are all robots, basically. They are robots. They're not human. It's all like just brushed off like, oh, well, it's not much different than mask making, is what Connell Cochran says. I think maybe it's a little different than mask making. A little more complicated to create murder robots that can like act on their own accord and go murder people.
I wouldn't call them robots. I wouldn't even call them androids. Like, these guys look like replicants. Like they are, you cannot mistake them for, they are disguised as human beings, except when you rip them open and they just have like orange Halloween goo that oozes out with some wires inside.
And we're going to see, like, as we go through the tour of Silver Shamrock, we see these different types of animatronic toys and stuff like that. So we're sort of seeing, where the progressions of where these robots come from. And like, we're told by Buddy Kupfer, like, oh, he's the greatest prankster of all time. He's the one who invented sticky toilet paper and the dead dwarf gag.
the dead dwarf gag. Like, what?
So apparently the dead dwarf gag is a holdover from the Nigel Neal script. He went in to explain it in more detail, and they removed it, unfortunately.
Man, I would love to know what the dead dwarf... I mean, I assume it's just like a life-sized dwarf that's dead. I mean, or appears dead anyway.
Who knows?
Because what could be more hilarious than like walking into like a public restroom and seeing a dead dwarf lying there? That would be hilarious. Oh, is this one of Connell Cochran's gags? So funny.
Well, and then they're like touring around, like you said, and they're seeing all these, like, there's this horrible animatronic Native American thing like that's going on, and he's like, I had one like that growing up, and it's just like
I used to stare at it for hours.
And they're just like beating on tom-toms or something. It's really offensive and weird.
And so these like old antique pipe organ and like automatons, or they're just wind-up toys, really. So I think we're taking this tour to sort of see that he started off making wind-up toys and moved to California, and within a few months started making lifelike androids.
Right.
After he set up shop.
Well, this is the natural progression, Troy.
Yeah.
Right. And instead of just like using that incredible leap in science to like rule the world, he's got other plans.
Oh, yeah.
Other strange plans. But let me ask you guys this. Knowing what we know, that these are all robots, is everybody working at the Silver Shamrock a robot? Like, is the old lady in the front, like there's all these like ladies that work out in the front, are they all robots? Do you think everybody's a robot?
There was a line somewhere that said that he brought all these people over with him. So I think that anybody who speaks with a really thick accent is from Ireland.
That makes sense.
I'm guessing, right?
Well, because the murder robots,
Yeah, they just wear suits.
and they don't even really say anything.
No, they don't talk, and they only wear suits.
So I think if you're talking, you're perceived to be human.
Oh, you're right, Jen, because that comes into play later on, the lack of dialogue from the robots.
I will accept that answer, although I think there may be one moment where that is called into question, because there's like a technician that is working in the lab
you're right.
who does speak.
You're right. Some of them do talk. It's tough because most of the film plays on a real precise logic. Right? So there's these little details that crack that open just a little bit. Like, this film is streamlined other than that.
It does feel painstakingly researched and like scientifically tested. All of its concepts stringently tested by science that these things could actually happen.
Mm-hmm. They could.
But there's a mysterious part of the building that's called final processing. And Buddy Kupfer really wants to take a peek into the final processing. And Connell Cochran's like, oh, no, it's just a little of this and a little of that, and won't let them in there. So, of course, that's suspicious. And Dan sort of is wandering around while they're sort of arguing about the final processing room, and he notices all the robot men looking around, and one of the robots is played by Dick Warlock,
Yes.
who is the stuntman who plays Michael Myers in Halloween 2. He's got a real great look. He kind of looks like a Hal Holbrook almost.
Yeah,
Like,
good
Yep.
call.
Yep.
I really enjoy his present. I think he's the best of all the murder bots.
Yes.
He's got another sweet head of silver hair.
And his name is Dick Warlock.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
It's such a good name.
Can't argue with that.
I just want to take a moment for the room in big letters being like just straight up called the final processing room. That's what it is. It's just that, that's what it's labeled. And this is where the final processing happens. And I don't know, it just really tickles me.
So Dan notices the robots, and then he and Ellie walk over to their like little garage, and she notices her dad's like olive station wagon under a tarp.
That's Papa's car.
Why did the robots keep the car? Like, get rid of the fucking car. Like, what are they going to like soup it up or whatever? Are they going to turn it into like a Fast and Furious car or something?
I mean, it was under a cover. They were kind of trying to keep
Hiding
it out
the
of the way,
evidence.
hiding it a little bit, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Connell doesn't really take a lot of precautions. He really should be running a tighter ship, I think. Like, get rid of that car. Come on, Connell.
She tried to walk up to the car, and suddenly, like, Tom Atkins is getting a little nervous, and she makes her way up to the car, and just robots come out of everywhere. They come out of the woodwork and accost her.
They know this is a bad scene. But so what happens after this is like he tries to call out, and he gets Jamie Lee Curtis on the line as an automatic operator. And then we find out that Ellie has been taken by the robots from the motel. And then the robots come for Dan, and he like jumps out of the hotel window. And like, honestly, there's two parts of this movie that bore the shit out of me. This is one part of the movie that bores the shit out of me because it's just Tom Atkins running around these dark streets of some crummy town, hiding like by a fence or going down an alleyway. And this goes on for like, it feels like 10 minutes of just him sneaking. He tries more phones, then like gets kind of chased, and then hides and like watches them pull into the factory, and then he finally breaks into the factory, and then he's sneaking around the factory. It's like, come on. Finally, something fun happens because Dan runs into this like old lady automaton that's like knitting, and he's like, tell me where they are or whatever to this old lady automaton.
I think he goes over to like shake her by the collar,
and her head falls off, and it's like, oh my God, she's a robot. And then Dick Warlock comes out, and they get into a fight, and during the fight Dan punches Dick Warlock hard in the stomach and pulls out this like yellow goo, and that's when we realize, my lord, these are robots. They've been robots all along. And then he's captured.
There's something about like the fact that he punched him, even though I know he punched him hard, but his hand goes right through. I think when I saw that as a kid, I used to have these nightmares about stuff like that. Like your body is just a little too soft, and that if you got in a fight that, you know, somebody's fist could just go right through you. It looks ridiculous now, but it kind of was disturbing to me.
So Cochran now has Dr. Dan in captivity. And so, like any good evil supervillain, he decides he wants to show Dan what's really going on in the final processing room, I guess. And he brings Dan into this control center, which is amazing because it's like this early 80s control center where there's like, you know, early 80s computer terminals with a big reel to reel and everything, and these monitors, and it's all sort of set up in the circle. And in the center of this room is an piece of Stonehenge.
It's one of the whole rocks.
Yes.
Which I wanted to say, they've only used about 1/16 of it. So the plan was to steal a part of Stonehenge. So somehow they got this giant rock. They somehow carted it across the Atlantic.
You wouldn't believe how we did it, he says.
But they only used a couple bucketfuls from it.
Yeah, exactly.
When I saw this today while I was watching it, I was thinking, because Facebook went down today, I was like, I bet this is what it looks like at like Facebook headquarters or whatever. There's like a giant Stonehenge there. And we're all like staring at our phones because like Stonehenge is making us look at it. But yeah, he's taking little pieces of Stonehenge and putting them in these buttons. And so that's what's powering the magic.
It's rock solid, plausible. This is what's happening. This is it.
Once we got into like the secret laboratory, I am so thrilled that we've got a horror movie that's going full sci-fi. We've got a place run by robots. We've seen laser beams. There's a giant piece of fucking Stonehenge in here, and a bunch of guys with computer screens everywhere. I'm so on board with this.
It's pretty amazing. And I remember as a kid, I was like, it felt like a sort of wrong flavor in my Halloween candy or whatever. But now I appreciate just how bug nuts insane it is. And this whole idea that they're these druids and everything, this will actually make a reappearance in the Halloween franchise later on in Halloween 6. So
that's right.
If you think we're done with druids here, no. There are more druids to come in the franchise. But Cochran wants to show Dan how this all really works. So they're planning a little demonstration. And this is the scene that I was talking about. That is the scene that you will remember if you have ever seen Halloween 3, because as Dan watches on a monitor, we see that there's this little artificial living room, and the Kupfer family comes in, and they're going to sit down and watch the commercial played on a television set as if they were watching it at home. Little Buddy Kupfer is going to be watching with his mask on. And like the mom's like, this is all so ridiculous, because there's like fake fruit and everything. And so the Silver Shamrock thing starts to play on the TV, and like little Buddy's watching, he's wearing the pumpkin mask, and like suddenly he like clutches his head, and we see like this orange goo kind of coming out of the front of his mask. It looks kind of like the inside of a pumpkin or whatever. And then he falls on the ground, and bugs start pouring out of the eye holes of the mask.
Rattlesnakes
Come pouring out of his mouth.
They're so big.
Yeah.
Like, it starts off not that way. There's like crickets and like roaches and small snakes and things like that. But then, yeah, we get full grown rattlesnakes coming out. This was the image that was described to me by my friend before I saw it.
It's also the image on the back of the video box, and I remember the still of Buddy grasping the mask and sort of holding it as it's wilting. It's got this kind of like wilting texture to it. When I saw that on the back of the video box, that sort of perked my interest. I remember, like, the fuck is that? The same way that Friday the 13th Part 4 has the picture of Corey Feldman's monster mask on the back of it. It was just in that era where, pre-internet, you had to just kind of guess at what these things were going to be, and you just had a couple of stills. That was the image on the back of the box, and one of the reasons I was very intrigued in seeing the movie.
What you were saying earlier, Sebastian, is like 100% right. Like, this is the treatment for the best salesman of the masks. Like, I don't know if that really sunk in as much as it did this time, where I was like, this is what happens to the person who like helped kind of get your evil plan going as well as it did. And yeah, because then the parents, like, I think the dad gets bit by a rattlesnake.
Yeah, mom just sort of drops to the ground, like faints or something.
Yeah, and this is like covered with bugs and stuff too coming for her. But I don't know what her death, maybe just her heart stopped because this was all so awful. But yeah, dad definitely gets bit by this full-grown rattlesnake that came out of the mask.
I often say that every great horror movie needs to have one super memorable scene. This is definitely it. Now, whether or not you could say this is a great horror movie, that may be up for debate, but you can at least say that it has a scene that you will not forget.
And the other thing about this scene is, now that you realize what the stakes are, you are appreciating how fucking mean this movie is.
Yes.
How mean-spirited this is. The whole plan now is to kill all the kids. That's the plan.
That was the scariest part to me, was like more just as I was hearing this before I even saw it. Because then once I saw it as a kid, I was, of course, like, this scene was a lot.
Yeah.
And the best part of the movie. But it was just hearing that secondhand from my friend and realizing, like, this is like a whole thing to like get kids.
Just kill all the kids.
And being a kid, like, you're just like, oh my God, like, this isn't supposed to happen.
And to do it in a way where it's just like their faces melt and poisonous animals leak out of their Halloween masks.
It's pretty much the worst way to die you can think of.
It's a nightmare.
Yes.
This scene is a total nightmare.
Kinder trauma, 100%.
Then it's sort of followed by this montage where we see all over the country. We see Dayton, Ohio, for whatever reason, Phoenix, Arizona, and Los Angeles. And we're hearing the Silver Shamrock theme over it. And we're seeing all these kids going out trick-or-treating with their masks.
And the trucks are going around saying, get home by 9 o'clock, kids, even though they're all different time zones. But we'll ignore that.
That was the other thing that was troubling too. Exactly. It was like, we're in all like different time zones.
So I didn't realize that. So he had to sit in that room for a whole day.
Yeah, he's just been sitting in that room a whole day.
Again, what does this man smell like at this point? Another day on top of what I already thought was already too long in those clothes. He said they were only going to last a day.
I think he's got bigger problems than body odor right now, though.
Okay, so he's been sitting in his jail cell tied to a chair for a day.
For a day.
Then at some point, he decides, I should probably get going.
But before that, Cochran gives him his awesome villain speech where he's talking about the druids and the origins of Halloween.
I love this speech.
Samhain.
Yeah.
I love when he's talking about like we'd huddle in our huts with the thatched roofs or whatever and like waiting for the dead to come or whatever. Really great, awesome speech.
This is what his plan is that 3,000 years ago, the planets were aligned and there was some sort of ceremony where they sacrificed, I don't know how many kids, but the hills ran red is what he describes it as.
The hills ran red.
And so now the planets are aligned again after 3,000 years.
Yes.
And the time is now. He has to do this now.
Yes.
This is his calling.
And this is when he also has the interaction with Dr. Dan when he's like, why, Cochran, why? And he's like, do I need a reason? He's like, Mr. Cuffler was right. You know, I do love a good joke. And this is the best ever. A joke on the children. It's just like.
And then that, in addition to the tagline on the movie poster, again, I love the movie poster, but the tagline is the night no one comes home.
That is brilliant.
Which is just fantastic.
Because it's a play on the night he came home from the original.
Play on the night he came home, but just so mean.
No one's coming home, kids. You're all gonna die.
So you put on the mask, the ad comes on, bugs come out of your head. They can do this to you at any time.
Yeah.
Because they've already shown us they can do it to somebody at any time. And in fact, this is going to happen to Dan at the same time that it's going to happen to everyone else, I guess, because he's watching the Horror-thon because Halloween is on TV and it's going to happen after Halloween, the movie.
Yes.
Yep.
But they don't really need to wait to do this. They could just pick any arbitrary time. So the whole thing about planet alignments doesn't really matter.
Not really, because it's the festival of Samhain. You know, it's got to be the night.
But that's more of just a ceremonial thing. It's not really part of the spell.
I hear what you're saying, but listen, I feel like I can relate to Connell Cochran a little bit because he's not the best planner, okay? But he's very passionate about his projects.
Right.
Okay. Everything's got to be just right, but I feel like maybe he's a little short-sighted in the way he's planned things out. I get that.
Like he's trying too hard to make it all
He's
perfect.
trying too hard, yes.
And I think that's his downfall, ultimately.
It totally is his downfall because once Dr. Dan escapes, bringing down Connell Cochran was actually pretty easy to do.
Not hard at all.
And Connell Cochran's is kind of like, oh, well.
Oh, good one. You got me.
He golf claps. Well, let's describe what happens for anybody who hasn't seen it. So Dan escapes into a conveniently large vent that only exists in movies, and there's no vents this large in anywhere in the world. He sneaks on, then he sneaks around. There's more sneaking. He's on the roof. Then he's in the warehouse. Then he fucking tries to call fucking Linda because he wants her to take the masks away from the kids because he knows what's going to happen. And she's like, are you drunk? And he's like, no, I'm not drunk. It's Cochran in the masks. Buddy Comfort. Like he is ranting like a drunk.
Just ranting all this stuff. I mean, he might still be drunk. Who knows?
So then he finds Ellie. He breaks her out of the like lab table that she's strapped down to. Conspicuously, she's not saying anything, but she is following him around obediently. At one point, they sneak back into the computer lab and they do this like totally goofy thing where they find like a mask rack with wheels on it and they hide behind the mask rack.
It's like a total like Abbott and Costello move.
Like as if like no one would notice a mask rack just moving across the lab
with 4 feet walking underneath it.
Nobody thinks to look up and be like, hey, is somebody behind that mask rack?
And also, I just want to point out that we're getting down to minutes here before this thing is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
All the people in the factory are still working on making masks.
Yeah.
They're still chiseling away at Stonehenge. The atmosphere is correct, but again, I feel like that's one of those tiny fissures in the logic of the movie.
Tiny fissure.
So, yeah, Dan figures out that he can cue up the commercial. So he sneaks behind like this bank of computers and punches in some random buttons that just happens to cue the commercial.
It's not random. You know what I noticed? Just this viewing, it is 666.
Oh, of course.
That's the
wow.
initiation sequence.
And he grabs a box of buttons and goes up to the ceiling rafters, which it makes no sense that there would be like theater rafters in this this big giant cement concrete lab. But whatever, we'll let go of that tiny fissure of logic. And he goes up with a box full of these buttons and just dumps them down on the lab, and there's just sort of raining down. They're sparking off and like shooting lasers, and they just happen to kill all the robots because for whatever reason, that's what they do when they fall down. And like, yeah, Cochrane's looking up at him, and he just starts slowly golf clapping his congratulations.
As a villain appreciates, oh, you've outwitted me.
I've been bested by a drunk. Cochrane's kind of the worst supervillain of all time. He's defeated by a drunken local doctor. That's all it took to defeat this 3,000-year plan of the Druids or whatever the hell it is. And so all the computers short out, and then I guess Stonehenge just gets pissed off or whatever and like zaps Cochrane, and then it looks like Cochrane turns into like a smiling piece of Stonehenge or something.
He almost turns into like a pillar of salt, is what I saw it as, but
I didn't know what that was.
it looked more like reflective tape.
It is one of the most goofy villain killings.
Odd choices.
And it's funny because I never really noticed it before, I think, until these last few viewings. Like, for whatever reason, I've sort of started to tune out at this part of the movie because it's just kind of a lot of running around and silliness. And then Cochrane just kind of disappears, and then the Stonehenge blows up, I think, and like the factory catches on fire. But if you think that's the end, think again.
No, we're about to get to one of the biggest twists in horror cinema history.
Right, like this is like blows Sixth Sense out of the water, this twist. Dan and Ellie are driving away, and Elliot is being conspicuously quiet, and then he looks over and, oh my God, Ellie is a robot too now.
They turned her into a robot, which I used to think, like, how did they do that in a matter of hours? But you're saying that they were there for a good long day.
Yeah.
And time just really doesn't matter here in Santa Mirror.
Did any of you see that coming? Ellie being a robot?
I mean, I've seen this movie like 100 times. Not only have I seen this movie 100 times, but when I went to audio school, for whatever reason, the guy that ran the Foley class had taken this scene and we all got to score our own Foley to this scene.
Oh man, that sounds
Wow.
so fun.
It was awesome. It was so much fun. I mean, the guy was a big nerd, obviously.
Yeah.
You'd have to be to know this movie. And I remember watching it, I was like, oh my God, is this Halloween 3? Because I mean, I hadn't seen the movie in a while. And I was like, I'd forgotten about this whole twist and everything. But it's true because the whole scene has so much Foleying in it. Because like, you know, Dan like hits her with a tire iron at one point and like her arm gets knocked off.
Was your Foley for Ellie, was it like beep, boop, 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 boop?
Yeah, I forget what I did. I mean, I think we had some sounds to choose from. I wish I still had it because we got like a copy of it afterwards, and I don't know what I did with my copy of it. It's probably on a disc somewhere. Anyway, yeah, like he hits her with a tire iron. Her arm gets severed at one point.
The scene carries on a bit. Yeah.
Does
Yes.
carry on a bit. Well, then, and after he's you know, killed her or whatever, he gets back into the car and her severed arm is still hanging on to like the armrest of the car. And then that attacks him, which is, oh my God, terrifying.
And this is one of those things that bugs the shit out of me in movies is when there's a small animal or a monster, like a little, maybe 1 foot monster or something, and the actor is holding it up to their neck.
Yeah.
And it's clearly not attached, but they're struggling with it and holding it up to themselves for dramatic effect. He does this for, it seems like 20 seconds fighting with this arm that's not actually really doing anything to him before he kind of throws it away. And when he does throw it away, it's in the most drunken, exhausted toss.
I think because we recently rewatched The Hand, this didn't really bother me that much because that's a whole film of
people
dealing
being
with-
trying to, instead of something you could just swat away.
Terrifying, Troy.
And then the other hand grabs him that's lying on the ground.
Yeah, I think I lose track of all the hands.
There's a lot of hands.
No, he fights Ellie for a long time.
Well, there's history there.
It's his love. He's struggling against his own love for her.
Yeah.
Once he's done with Ellie, he's got to go to the gas station that we saw in the beginning. He calls the TV stations because the gas station attendant is watching the horror-thon on TV and the big giveaways coming up.
Which is one phone call, by the way. One phone call calls all the stations.
All 3 channels, and this was back in the day when there was only 3 channels. And so he calls one station that connects to all 3 channels, and he's telling them to get the ad off the air. One station takes the ad off the air, then the second one does, but the third one keeps it on. And he's yelling, "Stop it, stop it, stop it!"
Oh, you just gave me goosebumps when you did that.
And we're not thinking about the fact that America has 4 time zones and that this wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, New York is already gone. All the kids in New York are dead.
But that is the shocking conclusion of Halloween 3, Season of the Witch.
I love that ending.
It's a pretty good ending, even though it makes no fucking sense whatsoever.
And it is doing that homage to Body Snatchers there, too, because he
Totally.
looks you right in the camera, which I think, what's his name did, and Kevin McCarthy.
Kevin McCarthy, yeah.
Yeah. Everybody likes to come down hard on this because it didn't have Michael Myers on it, so it was kind of the black sheep for a while, and it was sort of, everybody sort of viewed it as a dumb movie and everything. But is this any dumber than all the other movies that we love, like Phantasm and Suspiria? To me, this is an 80s classic, and if it was just Season of the Witch, everybody would have loved it. Think about, like, if we would have had more John Carpenter Halloweens that were just kind of bug nuts after this.
I think in theory, yes, but I think in practice, maybe not so much. If that was something that they were really serious about being successful, they needed to come out a little bit stronger than this movie. Because as much as I like this movie for its campy value and the fact that it's bug nuts crazy, it's pretty weak in terms of like a horror movie. It's not particularly scary. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Obviously, Halloween, the original, was the best foot forward for a movie called Halloween because it created an icon with Michael Myers as the killer. And that was the reason why this movie failed, basically, is because Michael Myers wasn't in it. So we don't really need to talk too much about that. But I just think that they needed to come up with something that was going to be equally as strong if they were going to then try to brand this going forward as
Episodic.
a Halloween anthology movie.
Okay, right.
It needed to be really, really strong. Like they needed to make Trick or Treat, the one that Michael Dougherty made years later,
Yeah.
like something that was that Halloween-y, that iconic to match Halloween. And then maybe you could have gone down the line and thrown this one in there after you've really established that that's what the brand is, that the brand is not Michael Myers. The problem is that they made Halloween 2 and it was like 2 movies with Michael Myers.
No, that's definitely the problem.
You're already like doubling down on the brand that what a Halloween movie is about Michael Myers. And now you're changing it in the 3rd movie.
Yeah.
That's a bad strategy.
No, I know why it didn't work, but and I know this is going to ruffle a lot of feathers, but to me, the following sequels to Halloween 4, Michael Myers is back. The sequels, if you're talking about weak movies, the ones that followed weren't really hitting them out of the park either, just because you brought back your serial killer.
But those were all just shameless cash grabs. I mean, John Carpenter's way out of the picture at that point. It's just, whatever, Yablans and Mustafa Akkad just trying to wring more money out of the name Halloween. Like they're not interested at all in doing something artistically interesting. Like, I feel like once it leaves John Carpenter's purview, then of course they're not going to do anything interesting and creative. They're just going to try to make more slasher movies because that's what was big in that time, you know?
And I guess that's kind of why I adore this movie as a Halloween movie, is because it was the last one with Carpenter's fingerprint on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, everything that followed afterwards, I personally kind of lost interest in the franchise. You're going to just make crappy sequels. I was way more into Friday the 13th, but that's kind of why I like Halloween 3.
I love Halloween 3 for that reason, and I think you're totally right. I think there's no argument to be made that artistically, once the franchise moves forward as just another slasher, it becomes bankrupt in that way. But I kind of love them because I love Michael Myers. And I remember being excited that Michael Myers was back for part 4.
Oh yeah, everybody was. That was a big deal. I remember that.
So yeah, you're right. And I do think, yeah, it still has that John Carpenter vibe, and that's what makes it sort of special. So yeah, I don't disagree, but I do get a lot of enjoyment out of the Halloween franchise moving forward. Is it a flaw, a defect in my character? Perhaps. But I just love the Halloween movies. I don't know what to tell you.
Yes, you do love the Halloween movies. We'll watch them all every Halloween season.
You say that with such weariness, as if it's not a joy.
It is not Jen's favorite franchise.
It's not Jen's favorite franchise. I love Halloween 3 just because it is what it is, and it's just bonkers. And like I said, I have a sweet spot for the nostalgia of the build up to seeing it. And I just like that it's as mean as it is in the crux of like what the whole thing is, and it's to torture and kill kids. It's bananas. And I don't know. I don't have a problem with where it lives. I mean, I understand why it obviously wasn't a success. It was clear as day the other night, just watching it with these eyes of just seen Halloween 2. And it's not like we haven't, done this sequence before or marathon them before, but I just felt it so much, like just getting into 3 where I just finished watching 2 and I'm like, wow, yeah, you could just like the disappointment of the Halloween fan going into this. I'm not as precious about the franchise as my husband is. I like 1, 2, and 3. 4 and 5 are so interchangeable to me. Like I get confused as to what happens in those. And this is after many, many viewings.
Me too.
You don't understand the ins and outs of the Jamie Lloyd trilogy?
I mean, I think you explain it to me every year we watch it. And no, I still don't. I just get confused as to where we are with what's going on. But I am not confused when we get to 6, because I appreciate 6 for being as crazy as it is, because it is picking up kind of some cues from 3 as far as the weird druidness and all of that.
Sebastian doesn't explain the Jamie Lloyd trilogy to me. He mostly corrects me about it.
Not just you, pretty much anybody that'll speak to me.
Yeah, that's what's happening over here too, Troy. But yeah, I really enjoy Halloween 3. I'm glad it exists. I get, again, why it is where it is, and not everybody loves it. I mean, I think people have come around to it, but I certainly understand why it was not loved right out the gate.
Well, time has been kind to it, and now I think most people who are horror fans have some sort of affection for it and consider it one of the strongest entries in the franchise, despite its craziness.
Oh yeah, people have come way around to it. I just wanted to read one thing that was on the Wikipedia page that was a quote from one of the reviews of, it said that Vincent Canby of the New York Times remarks, Halloween 3 manages the not easy feat of being anti-children, anti-capitalism, anti-television, and anti-Irish all at the same time.
That's wonderful.
Well, I don't think we can top that, so
no.
I'm going to go grab a 6er of High Life, steal a piece of Stonehenge, and turn Jen into a killer robot.
Dun, 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 dun.
Happy up, it's Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy up, it's Halloween, Silver Shamrock. that about does it today for Tentpole Trauma. If you like what you heard, check out our social media presence on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Just look for Tentpole Trauma. That was easy, wasn't it? If you like us, hit subscribe and leave us a sterling review on iTunes, if you dare. If you really like us, head over to patreon.com and get involved in one of our fabulous tiers. You'll be glad you did. Want to communicate with Tentpole Trauma? Send an email to tentpoletrauma@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And who knows, one day you may even get your email read on one of our shows. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you real soon.